It's all over. New Zealand 18, Australia 0. The Australian coach said of the Kiwis, no team in the world would have beaten them today.
G'day there, welcome along to the second episode of the ACC's Agenda Special, Kärcher's Blast from the Past, a four-part series where we look back at the seminal and sometimes forgotten moments in the magnificent sporting history of this fine land. Last week, we took you back to the giddy old summer of 1992 when the young guns were going gonzo, and today we wallow in the festering mud bath of Carlaw Park, July 7th, 1985. This is the Agenda's Blast from the Past, brought to you by the sports lovers at Kärcher, the world's #1 water blaster brand, and the perfect machine to get the outdoors ready for summer.
This is the Agenda Podcast's Blast from the Past. Episode 2, Carlaw Park, 1985. The Kiwis v Australia. The Mud Bath Murder.
Graham's busted him up to centre. Gets it to Kevin Tamati. They get it on. They're going to score. Under the post, the Kiwis have gone in. Eight fingers in.
Proudly brought to you by Kärcher Water Blasters. Get ready for summer and clean 50% faster with Kärcher.
Okay, it's a pleasure to welcome along into the studio, as per usual, Dylan Cleaver, but massive league head Dai Henwood. You're going to love getting your teeth into this one.
Oh, look, this time in my life, I was a 7-year-old boy. I was just being awakened to all the beautiful things in the world, from Al McPherson to rugby league.
And Sirens? Was that Sirens? No.
Oh, yeah, no,
Yeah.
it was Sirens.
Oh, yeah.
It was great.
Yeah.
You left that.
The swimming hole scene.
So sorry, I'm off track now.
I've only ever watched 82 minutes of that film, and I think the runtime is 97. However, we're here to talk rugby league.
Yes, and I'm going to come off the push off the pickets and take the first hit up here, okay? Why are we featuring a dead rubber? Why would the listeners not just hit the played as marked button on this podcast before you even open your mouth, Dylan Cleaver?
Because, Mike Lane, Di and I are about to tell you this is a dead rubber in name only. It's less of a dead rubber, in fact, and more like the culmination of a golden era of Trans-Tasman rugby league rivalry. That's right, isn't it, Di?
Yeah, you're completely right. I mean, you might even say it's the near orgasmic climax to some serious friction that had been building up over the golden winter of 1985, and for it to happen at Carlaw Park, which was the mud and urine-soaked spiritual home of New Zealand Rugby League, that made it all the more special.
Okay then. I'll get into it. So it was a bit noisy ahead of this match. 1985, there's a few iconic moments. A few flashpoints, perhaps? Dylan?
Yeah. Look, I'll simplify for ease of understanding for listeners. The build-up was dominated basically by three themes. The build-up to this third test was dominated by three themes. The first theme is Kevin Tamati versus Graham Dowling.
Yes.
The second theme is John Rebo's second test miracle. And the third, and probably lesser known from a New Zealand perspective of the three themes, was the Australian coach Terry Fearnley effectively declaring war on the Queenslanders.
And obviously Terry Fearnley, he's the coach of the Australian team?
Yes, and he was also coach of the New South Wales State of Origin team. But we'll get to that.
Okay.
So we're talking about the third test here, the first test, but we've got to really go through the series as a whole, because that gives the context to this final test. The first test was played at the old Lang Park, which is on the same site as today's Suncorp Stadium.
Have you been to Suncorp, Di?
Yes, I have, only for an All Blacks game.
Ironically.
Yeah, I've never been there. It's the holy grail to go there for a State of Origin.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and look, apart from the fact it's on the same dot on the map, Suncorp and Lang Park have about as much in common as a cask of Cook Chasseur and a bottle of 1978 Shadow Nerf to part.
Okay.
Yeah. So the Lang Park was shaped like a cauldron and acted like a cauldron as 22,000 4X'd up Queenslanders manned the embankments and got jacked up on the great game of rugby league. This was the heart of working class Brisbane, and they had zero time for softies.
No pussies allowed.
No pussies allowed. Tony Palmer, who was doing the commentary, set the tone from the outset when he said the test is underway, what they're calling World War III.
players making their test debut. John Rebo, the winger, brought in at the last moment to replace the injured Eric Groth. That may or may not cost them some advantage in this test. They are a bigger side than New Zealand. New Zealand, the Kiwis average 12 tests apiece. The only player making his debut is reserve back Mark Elia. They're slightly taller but much lighter than the Australians and will rely on pace and ball skills. Clayton Frand and Olsen Filipina will hold the key to the backline attacks with experienced support from a very mobile pack. The only question mark is over Owen Wright and how well he'll handle propping against a front row reckoned to be the world's best. So expect a pretty torrid forward battle, especially in the first 10 minutes. The kick-off by Mal Meninga. The test is underway. What they're calling World War III.
Yeah, leave alone. They love it, don't they, over there?
Yeah, World War III is a bit, maybe Korean War 58th parallel, but not, World War III's a bit full on. We've barely finished World War II.
So looking at that, though, that Kiwis team, because it's not like now where you basically, a Kiwis team is stacked with NRL players, which are probably household names in Australia, and you could say that about the Tongan team and the Samoan team as well at the moment. But back then, it was a household name of Australian team and a bunch of unknowns, really, eh?
Yeah, maybe even some of the Australians weren't household names, because in those days to get your Australian League, you sometimes had to go down to the Video Easy store and get your highlights from your Winfield Cup, which were normally a week old on video cassette. So League was very much the poor cousin to rugby union as far as coverage goes. But you did right. The Kiwis had a sprinkling of players in the Winfield Cup and a sprinkling of players that had come out of the Brisbane competition as well. But there were also players that were still playing club footy in New Zealand.
Right. I remember hiring VHS of Winfield Cup. They knew how much I liked it, so they had it behind the beaded curtain. And everyone would look over, there's Henwood getting his bloody rugby league DVDs, VHSs again.
Debbie does Dallas, all the old classics, and then Winfield Cup.
Yeah, and then, Cronulla Sharks playing the North Sydney Bears.
So this first test.
Yeah, it was a wonderful test, actually, the first test. It was won 26-20 by Australia. Kangaroos scored early through Chris Close. Remember Chris Close?
Not really.
He was the long-time manager of the Queensland State of Origin team once he stopped playing. Hugh McGowan replied with a soaring effort off an Ulster Filipina bomb. These are all names that are going to continue to feature through this episode. John Rebo scored, and then in the match's pivotal moment, set up Noel Crusher Cleo. He replied with a try, and then I guess the game's pivotal moment was Noel Crusher Cleo cold cooking Mark Graham Sharko in a tackle that sent him to sleep.
As Mark Graham is still down in the hands of the trainer in back play, receiving attention, and Julian Rascanares calls timeout. Mark Graham, such a vital cog in this New Zealand side, their captain, and here it is again, as he was hit by Noel Cleal. And over the top, Steve Roach. Well, perhaps we were a bit rash in what we said about Kevin Tamati letting one go at Chris Close, because Steve Roach got that one in as well just earlier, and that may well have been what stirred Kevin Tamati up.
Mark Graham, who you mentioned there, Sharko, he is someone I've sort of had a bit more of a deep dive into. He's got a doco made about him by his son.
Sharko, the
and
doco.
He's not I wouldn't call him so much an imposing figure like Blocker Roach was for Australia, but he was our enforcer. Not only was he good with his offloads and actually just playing the game of rugby league, he is the one that put us on the front foot. He chucked in the little stiff arm where it was needed, the little jab, the legal Hopewadi, if you will. And I reckon it definitely was, if you could take him out of the game, you took New Zealand out of the game. He was our talisman.
To have a target on your head or on your back, usually in league it's just in the front of your head. League's probably the worst game, you know what I mean? Because they can take you out and take you out legitimately. Like any other sport, probably couldn't do that, but league was like, okay, we need to take out Sharko.
Yeah.
Okay, blocker, just go and knock his head off. And he knocks his head off and he's out of the game. You know what I mean? It's one of the few sports where you can actually legitimately do that. Rugby at the time was probably verging on that a little bit, but not quite.
And you can mark up against your opposite, right, in a way you can't say in rugby. Like I remember once Brad Thorne talked about when he moved to rugby and he started off at number 8 and he thought, right, okay, he looked at who his number 8 opposition was that day and said, right, I'm going to get the better of him. Never saw him during the entire game.
Yeah, because he'd never go one-on-one.
No, never go one-on-one. And he said in league it's the opposite. He said you might be up against Paul Harrigan or Mark Glanville or something that day, and you stood across the line from him, and whoever won that battle was helping their team win. So that's where you go. So anyway, despite the Kiwis' best player wandering around the field in a concussive fog, the Kiwis really played some incredible footy that day. You had youngsters like Dean Bell on the wing and scrum half Clayton Friend. They were electric.
Why is the image of Clayton Friend for me always got a durry in his mouth? Is there a photo somewhere of him in a changing room with a cigarette hanging out his mouth?
With Sharko next to him, I think. Also sucking on the gas tray, Yeah, I think they enjoyed a dart. Half-time was probably about 40 minutes was probably as long as they could go without one. So, Olsen Filipina went in for a try before half-time. It was 14-14 at the half, but Graham didn't last long when they came back out. He was extremely sick. And straight after the half, Dean Bell scored one of the greatest Kiwi tries of all time. It was a dummy wraparound.
Dean Bell. Bell through. Great break by the Kiwi winger. Gary Jacks missed him. He'll go in and score. Oh, what a brilliant solo try. What a brilliant try. As fine an individual try as you're likely to see in Test match football. It came from absolutely nowhere.
But that would be the last point they scored, unfortunately.
Will be the last rugby league point.
Yeah. Yes, there's been a few fight points to be handed out on this one, weren't there?
Yeah, I mean, look, as I said again, amazing test. Australia won 26-20 with their second half comeback, but the test will forever be remembered for one thing and one thing only.
And that's right, that is Tamati v Dowling.
Oh, it was better than the Thriller in Manila, better than Shane Cameron.
The Mountain Oyster.
Versus Tua down in the mighty Field Days venue. The interesting thing about this is that this was one hell of a punch-up, right, on the field. Like, I don't think a punch-up like this has been rivaled. Yet, the cameras stayed with the action of the actual rugby league. They didn't pan over to the fight and stay with that. Because when they went to the fight, Tamati was being restrained by Blocker Roach.
Classic Blocker Roach.
Who was fully roundhousing him with a cheap shot or two.
Oh, yeah. And so they both get binned by the French ref. When I say both of them, Dowling and Tamati, who were the instigator of the fight. So it was a one-on-one fight before Blocker Roach decided to make it a two-on-one fight. Blocker Roach escaped refereeing justice, but Dowling and Tamati were sent to the bin, and they stupidly, from the game's organisers' point of view or officiating point of view, they walk off together, and you can see them walking off together, and you can see Dowling gobbing off at Tamati. Now, I'm not a lip reader, but I see something in there that looks remarkably like he's calling him a slack something.
Yeah, right.
Kevin Tamati and Greg Dowling both in the sin bin. One imagines they'll be able to sort things out. Kevin Tamati hasn't lost his sense of humour, or has he?
She's on again.
Well, it was always going to be on between these two.
This is not good. They should stop this in a hurry.
Hugh McGann going over to try and break it up.
Watching the cameras have switched right off it because it's over behind the fence now, over that far terrace side.
Well, it was always going to be on between those two props, Kevin Tamati and Greg Dowling, both of them unofficially listed as the enforcers for their side.
So, it is an iconic piece of footage of those two players squaring up and then just going hammer and tongs. They spilled over the hoarding. But the commentator, I guess, has lost his sense of humour. Or has he?
And then Tamati went a great move. He went what we now know as the ice hockey fight, where he does the jersey over their head and then throws it a few. And he held his own because it was 2-on-1, basically.
Yeah. The first fight was 2-on-1. That fight was definitely 1-on-1. He didn't hold his own in the 1-on-1. He won it. I've given him points.
You've given him the points victory?
Points, yeah. By some distance.
Well, that's good. So far, as far as a tone setter for the series, it'd be hard to beat.
Yeah, certainly. And then the series moved to New Zealand. It moved to the spiritual home of league in New Zealand, Carlaw Park, for the final 2 tests of the series. The second test was played on Sunday, the 30th of June, and it was a bit of a tragedy, really. Heartbreak. Pure and simple.
So New Zealand go down 10-6 in that match?
Yeah. Well, what can I say about it? Really bitter ending to it. The Kiwis were awesome. They were sensational that day. 1 minute left, and they're leading 6-4. Perhaps questionable on-field decision. They ran it on the last when they had a chance to kick deep, and when you kick deep at Eden Park, at Carlaw Park, it's pretty difficult to run out from deep because it's pretty boggy.
Yes.
In particular corners. Kangaroos hadn't been able to do anything from deep all game, despite being star-studded with the likes of Rebo and Gary Jack and Mal Meninga. Gene Miles, I think, might have been playing. So they were just totally outplayed. And the Kiwis left about 12, 18, 2 or 3 tries on the table. They still leaded. But, however, they gifted the ball to Australia on their own 40 metres.
And at that point, the cameras panned to coach Graham Lowe, a very young Graham Lowe, where the commentator said, "There's Graham Lowe. He senses victory." But what happened?
The worst moment in Kiwis history. That's what happened.
Yeah, I've forensically analysed this. Hooker Greg Kinescu, he crabbed to the right on halfway before flipping it out the back to King Willie Lewis. He looked left and threw a long floating pass that made Hugh McGann's eyes light up, and he inexplicably charged out of the line, perhaps with thoughts of a intercept, but instead it floated past him like an autumn leaf and hit Gary Jack at speed, hit the hole where McGann should have been.
And as the cover got to him, he threw, a suspiciously forward pass to an unmarked John Rebo on the left wing, and depression washed over a muddy Carlaw Park, like Agent Orange over a Viet Cong village. It was seriously depressing.
Right on the halfway mark as Graham Lowe, the New Zealand coach, senses victory. Here's Kinescu getting it back to Lewis. Now to Jack. Jack in the clear. Jack has only the fullback to beat. Throws the dummy. Tries to link up with Rebo. Rebo for the corner. Rebo scores. Australia lead. John Rebo is in for Australia. And it came from nothing.
You look at the footage, because some of this great footage they've got from back then, the crowd looks like stunned mullets, literally. So again, I've got to ask, why would so many of them turn up again the following week at the same boggy venue to watch the two same teams?
It's a very good question, Mike, and I think I can help.
Okay, we'll take a quick break and we'll come back with the match in question. Before we get into the actual match, I never had the pleasure of going to Carlaw Park. I remember watching it on TV. I remember driving past it down the bottom of Auckland there, down Parnell. Can you paint a picture of what Carlaw Park was? What it looked like? What it was made up of?
It was unprepossessing in terms of looking at it. Like, it sounds very bucolic and nestled in the kind of foothills of the Auckland domain and that, but it was probably... the less attractive side of it was that it was right under the Parnell train station. And if you go back to the early days of Auckland history, Parnell was a bit of a shithole.
Yeah,
actually.
right.
It's hard to imagine it now. And a very working class area, and this was a park that...
Was it below sea level? Why was it so boggy?
By how muddy it was, it feels like it was below sea level. And I just think Bartercard whenever I think Carlaw Park, and the wonderful sort of old Aztec way of trading using Bartercard, which sponsored the Bartercard Cup in New Zealand, and sort of was where all those unknown rugby league players came from before they made their way over to Sydney.
So it was appallingly serviced by basic amenities too. So you had one stand, not on the rail. You had the railway stand, which was where the sort of members and fishheads sat, and the players and coaches. On the other side, there was this magnificently utilitarian sort of concrete terrace stand, but there were so few toilets that it was just generally accepted that at halftime or in lengthy breaks of play, everyone just went out the back of the stand and just peed against the wall.
Right.
So anyone kind of going up that road from the Domain that went past the Stanley Street Tennis Centre and up into the Domain there, it wasn't so much the sight of just a line of men with their backs to them peeing against the wall. It was just the stench of like lion red and urine, pot smoke, just all swirled into this miasma of stink, really.
Okay.
Oh, you've just described an honest time in New Zealand. You know, this is an honest time in God's own.
Okay, so we are at the third test of this series. The Kiwis have lost the series 2-0. Heartbreak in the second one. They played valiantly in the first game at Lang Park. What happened in this third test and the build up to it?
Well, both coaches took extraordinary polar opposite approaches, really. It really was the start of the legend of Graham Lowe, while it was the beginning of the end for Terry Fearnley, the Kangaroos coach. The Kiwis woke up from that second test misery. They didn't want to get out of bed. They were still reeling from being totally dominant in the second test and somehow losing. And Lowe did something that sounds kind of cheesy in a way, but it was actually amazing. Have you got any idea what it was?
Yes, I do. On the Friday afternoon before the third test, he got them on a bus, didn't he, and dropped them off at the bottom of Queen Street and said, go on, have a walk, mate.
Yeah, absolutely spot on there, Dai. The cunning bugger had also pre-rang a couple of radio stations ahead. So the public would know, even if his team didn't. This was in the days before cell phones and, mass instant communication, right?
Radio's when radio was relatively important.
Yeah, this was the original boobs on bikes.
So apparently this is how the late, great Olsen Filipina remembered it. He said that Graham told us to walk down Queen Street and back up again. So down one side, back up the other. We were like, no, this is not happening. We'd lost the series and we thought everyone would hate us. So no one moved on the bus. Lowe lost it and said, get the fuck out of the bus.
Yep. People just turned up en masse. They spilled out of their offices and many of the central city taverns. In those days, it would have been like the Occidental, maybe the Globe, although that wasn't Queen Street, was it?
It was off Queen Street, though.
Yeah, Park at the Bar, maybe. Yeah. Was that still around back then, off Fort Street? Anyway, there was certainly no shortage of people just walking up to them, shaking their hands, patting them on the back. No selfies back then, and basically telling them how awesome they thought they were.
So they've spent basically, since they lost the last game, just thinking they're complete losers who have let the country down. And now, boom, they're 10 foot tall again.
Yeah, and the weird thing is it's a completely opposite effect on the Kangaroos, who are the ones who are actually 2-0 up in the series. They've been ripped to pieces in the press because the Australian League press is pretty aggressive and forthright. And Coach Terry Fearnley has read all the clippings and he's taken it out on a significant subsection of the side.
The Queenslanders.
Dead right. Yep. Part of this was a quirk of timing. The test occurred between the second and third. The test series occurred between the second and third Origin matches, and part of it was just pure animosity between Fearnley and Wally Lewis, who couldn't stand each other.
Sounds like a wicked team dynamic, doesn't it? So this was what was written about it. What was weird was that Terry Fearnley was also New South Wales State of Origin coach in 1985, and they were up 2-0 in the series. It was the first time New South Wales had won the State of Origin, which started 5 years earlier in 1980. So he was in New Zealand with a team chock full of players he had coached to an historic victory. Then rumours soon surfaced that Fearnley and Lewis did not get along, which you've obviously stated. Lewis later confirmed this by admitting in television interviews that the pair hated each other. Lewis also publicly stated that he believed Fearnley openly favoured Vice-Captain Wayne Pearce, as well as the rest of the Kangaroos who were from his New South Wales team. At one point, before the third test in Auckland, Lewis claimed to have caught Fearnley and Pearce making out. No. Going over team selection in Fearnley's hotel room. Something strongly denied by the pair. So, there we go. They may have denied it, but the selection for the third test apparently only fueled the fire.
Yeah. Well, Fearnley dropped 5 players from the second test win, 4 of them Queenslanders. Chopper Close, Mark Murray, Greg Dowling, and Greg Kangaroos. Noel Cleaver was the only New South Wales player dropped.
Who came in?
Steve Ella, Des Hasler, Peter Tunks, and Benny Elias, all cockroaches, were drafted down. And I guess the obvious question to ask after that is, how did that go down?
I'd say all hell would have broken loose. I love it. I love how internal this is with the Australians. Like, they're in a good space. They've 2-0 up, yet they've somehow managed to find a way to
Also, in modern
it.
day league, the idea of playing this test series in the middle of State of Origin is so
crazy.
bizarre.
It's crazy. So apparently all hell broke loose. Queensland Rugby League Chairman, Federal Senator Ron McAuliffe, geez, that's a weird name, condemned the move diplomatically, of course, by stating it's a football assassination and beyond all reasoning. There can be no reasonable excuse for it.
Yeah, and a really funny thing about this was that such was the animosity in the group between the New South Wales and Queensland players that Paul Vaughton, just one of the 4 cane toes to retain his place, wrote in his book that Mark Murray and Kangaroos acted as the Kangaroos statisticians for the third test. But their stats consisted of recording only the number of errors that were made by the players who directly replaced them, which was Hasler and Elias.
Oh, my God. So we've got one team was feeling patriotic fervour seeping through their pores thanks to a walk up Queen Street, and the other was feeling like a house divided against itself.
But so it's important to note, though, Dylan, that this wasn't a complete dead rubber, was it?
No. It was the first qualifying match for the World Cup, which was...
How do you... I mean, surely there's only 3 nations that are playing league at this stage. So why do you have to qualify?
France was still relatively... Not strong. Strong's not the right word. France still had a relatively robust, I guess, league program. But, yeah, it worked. The World Cup worked on a points basis, and the points you accumulated through these games then ended up being a final. And as it ended up, the final was between New Zealand and Australia, and they held it at Eden Park, and it was a freaking disaster. And that definitely won't be the subject of a Kärcher blast from the past at any point.
No, maybe the rise of Lebanon Rugby League might be.
So I'm not sure the punters would have known it was a World Cup qualifier, did they? They just wanted to come along and watch Aussie get their basically heads ripped off by a Kiwis team that were on the rise. So Carlaw Park was fizzing at the bunghole.
Oh, absolutely. It was the mist of lion red and urine just steaming off the park. I mean, think how fizzed you'd be for this, because it was different to nowadays where it's all you're watching Instagram shorts and build-ups and all that. It's all in your head and the odd little bit in the paper you're reading, and it's not till you actually get to the ground that the vibe really starts to go.
Do you think there was one Australian in that crowd? Because I can imagine it would be quite hostile.
Yes, it was Kathy Freeman, strangely enough. No.
A young Kathy Freeman. So 18-0. What a great result. The first time the Kangaroos have been scoreless since the 1950s.
Wow.
But was it reflective of the match?
Nah, not really. The Kiwis should have won by more.
Okay.
They absolutely smashed them.
Well, they won't want to flick it around too much and give away any opportunities to Australia. Full-time showing on the clock. Maiden friend, with the chip up, for Luluai holds it.
And there's the full-time hooter.
That is the end of the game. And the crowd rushing on the field to congratulate a Kiwi side that finally has done it right. They may have lost the series, but they're now 2 points up in the World Cup round-robin competition, and this means Australia must beat them twice to be on equal points.
I doubt in the history of Australian Rugby League, especially in the last 20 years, that they've been more comprehensively beaten as they have been today. They really haven't looked like scoring any tries, and New Zealand have looked by far the best side and deservedly have won out the winners by 18 points to 0.
It's a game where I feel they should have. There's probably, it felt like there was about 12 to 16 more points in there. And if you look back on this, and it's well worth looking at it on YouTube, we played what I'd consider very fast, modern running rugby league. Mark Graham, Sharko, who we talked about before, he wasn't so much in the enforcer role. He was just running beautiful lines. Clayton Friend was always on his inside or outside shoulder looking for an offload. And for people who enjoy kicking, this is the golden era of the toe poke, which where you just line it up, lie the ball down and sort of toe poke it over. Olsen Filipina actually had great success with that. Yeah. And he got a couple of goals over. He missed some others. But I was impressed in this game mainly with the running rugby of the Kiwis.
Yeah, and the beauty of it as well was it wasn't so structured. It's like rugby league, modern rugby league is very coached, right? Yes. In certain parts of the field you have to do certain things, and it almost always involves 4 one-out hit-ups before you really get to your set plays. They're running wraparounds, they're running scissor moves off tackle 2 and things like that. It's actually brilliant. And the forwards are handling that. There's a couple of forwards that don't touch the ball, like their job is enforcing and tackling. But the second rowers, the loose forwards, they're all doing these amazing like one-handed flip passes. Hugh McGowan was an athletic freak back then. Mark Graham was an athletic freak.
Oh, and you'd have to say that Friend was the star of the show. Yeah. I mean, he was amazing. He opened the door to a contract at Norths because, I mean, players were just feverish to try and get over to the New South Wales League to try and earn some money. And Clayton Friend, quoted in Stuff, in 2023, I'm not sure that Stuff was online in 1985.
Some stuff was.
Yeah. He was saying, we were down and out after losing the second test in the last minute, and we picked ourselves up to play like that. It was pretty special. It was an accumulation of a lot of hard work.
Well, there you go. One of the great matches, and we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to have a look at the legacy that this game left, both the immediate and the long term. Rightio, post this match on a high, 18-0. They've drubbed Australia. They've kept them to a donut. Obviously, Australia would have just returned back their tail between their legs.
Well, hilariously, the tour didn't end there for Australia. They then had to return to Carlaw Park again, which must have just been a festering mess by then.
So 3 weeks in a row. 3 weeks in a row.
So they had to play Auckland on a Tuesday night.
Oh,
and back then, Auckland took a lot of pride in the way they played
rugby league
against touring teams in particular. They like to beat them up. On this night, though, it was a decent Auckland side, but the Kangaroos took out all their frustrations. They won 50-10 in front of another near-capacity crowd, though, it had to be said. But in terms of immediate legacy, there are implications here and in Australia. In Australia, Terry Fearnley stepped down as Australian coach. He was replaced by Canberra Raiders head coach Don Furner. The Australian Rugby League made a number of decisions for the future Australian teams, including the fact that no current State of Origin coach could also be their Australian coach. And mid-season tests would only take place before or after the Origin series and not during, to avoid bringing the New South Wales-Queensland rivalry into the Australian team.
Tuesday game really intrigues me because this was also in a time when I forget what year it was, if Manly made a run to the finals, and if you drew in the quarterfinal, you had to replay the game on a Tuesday. So they drew their quarter, then drew their semi. So they played 4 games in 2 weeks. That was just, imagine that just, you play on the Saturday, then you show up on the Tuesday.
So was that the Tuesday following the Saturday test?
Yeah.
Holy. So you get beaten up by the Kiwis, and then you got to come up against basically an Auckland team looking to knock your block off as well. Fucking hell. No ice bars back then, Dai.
No, and this is an Auckland team probably with slightly less tackling techniques than the Kiwis.
Another great thing that New Zealand Rugby League used to do was they would send touring teams down to Greymouth for a midweek game against West Coast. I think it was Wingfield Park. I might have that name slightly wrong, but it was just out of Greymouth, and it was just full. They closed the pits for those
Right.
days, so everyone could come and watch. And Wingfield Park was not blessed with some of the world's most effective curators or grounds people. And
So a bit rocky.
touring teams would talk about, being tackled into gravel kind of situations. Gravel was sometimes sprinkled on patches to help the drying process. So imagine playing a team full of coal miners in a midweek match.
But admittedly, I'd say the aftermatch would have been sensational down there on the West Coast. I'd say that would have been great. Looking at the long-term legacy of this match, first of all, Graham Lowe. Lowie.
Oh, Lowie. First of all, it's worth watching this again for seeing his beautiful moisturised skin, which you don't often see these days. But this opened up a world of coaching for Lowie. He'd already coached the Brisbane North's Devils to a Queensland premiership, and that was a massive deal back then. And then he had this victory, and he would go on to have a legendary reign at Wigan, a slightly less glorious time at Manly, although he did pack a team full of Kiwis. Plus, he was a beloved coach of Queensland, taking a relatively weak side to a series victory. So, Lowie was, he's an icon in New Zealand rugby league, really.
Yeah, absolutely. It also opened the way for many more Kiwis to play in Australia.
Is that purely because of Lowie, or is it because of the series? And
it was mainly because of the series and just how good they were. Kiwis were considered Mark Graham, and that was about it. And now suddenly they're looking at Olsen Filipina, who hadn't done a lot in his Sydney career up until then. They're going, how the hell haven't clubs like Balmain or Norse got the best out of Olsen Filipina? You know? I think they had the Sorensen brothers were probably playing at Cronulla back then, but there was still most of the Kiwis tended to look to England first and foremost. Yeah, and some were still playing at home. Hooker Howie Tamati, Kevin's cousin, played for Waitara in the 4-team Taranaki competition, for heaven's sake. And look, as I said, those that had a bit of wanderlust, Great Britain had been a more traditional home for the best players, with the likes of Graham McGahn and the Sorensen brothers starring in Sydney. But this all started to change. In fact, if you go down that Kiwis team, the likes of Kemble, he was at Hull. Gary Prome was at Hull Kingston Rovers. James Lulawai, what a magnificent, silky player in the centres he was. He played at Hull, as did Dane O'Hara on the wing. Kevin Tamati was a witness player. And even on the reserves bench, they had a guy called Mark Elia, who was a very handy club cricketer too in Auckland. He played for a team called Southend Invicta, which would later become the London Broncos for a little while.
So that seems so strange to me that they saw the window of opportunity on the other side of the world and not across the Tasman.
Oh, who wouldn't want to go to Widnes instead of the northern beaches of Sydney?
But it kind of seems strange that was the case. That was where the golden goose was, not just over the
Great
ocean.
It had been happening for a long time, going way back to the days of Ces Mountford. That's how far back in league history you go, when New Zealanders started going to Wigan, and in particular Graham West, who was a very fine Kiwis captain, was also at Wigan. The Great Bits rated us, and I don't think it's being too harsh to say they rated us. The Australians didn't. They just thought we were rubbish.
Were they just a bit snobby?
There might have been a slightly colour-tinged view of
bit of racism.
New Zealand. Yeah, you said it.
I think it's worth noting that if you look back at those early days of rugby league, it definitely wasn't what we see it as now, as 60% plus Polynesian, Indigenous, Maori. Back then, it was a very white working class
Australian league.
Australian league.
Yes.
I'm talking about here, was very much that white working class sport, and we had a lot more colour and flavour about our team.
Yeah, rugby league in New Zealand was kind of the sport of the freezing workers and the wharfies. And in fact, Auckland Club League, which has got a fascinating history, which we got to dig into one day, because it's kind of cool, a lot of the history. But some of their clubs were based around, workplaces. Yeah. Like Otahu, which was a dominant club in Auckland, was largely, I believe, around the South Down freezing works.
Yeah.
The teams like City Newton in the city were mainly worked at the wharves.
Sweet. So, when you say it opened the door, was there a flood of players who went over there all of a sudden? Did that entire Kiwis team suddenly get offered contracts over in New South Wales? Because it wasn't the NRL then, was it?
No, it was the New South Wales Rugby League.
Oh, and on that, how good is it seeing the touchies running around with TNT on their back? It's those sort of iconic memories for me of rugby league. TNT, Winfield Cup.
Using the leather ball with the black...
Steeden.
Yeah, no, they had the big old... the same ball the All Blacks used to use, the brown one with the black end.
Yeah.
The big one that wasn't... It almost, as the game went on, turned into a soccer ball. It got rounder and rounder.
And heavier.
As it got more and more waterlogged.
Because I didn't know much about this series. I mean, I probably saw YouTube clips of that Tamati Dowling fight 1,000 times. Had no context of where it was from and what the series it was. Because I kind of grew up in that 90s. This obviously opened the door to some of the iconic players and games from that, like your Jared McCracken's.
Absolutely.
Gary Freeman.
Brent Todd, Sean Hoppe, Jason Williams, Gavin Hill, Jason Donnelly, Terry Ermondson, and that famous test where Dean Lonergan gets the old stiff arm and his leg starts shaking, reaching for Jesus. Yeah, that's all that.
The concussion twitches.
Matthew Ridge at Manly, the only man to bike across the Tasman on a BMX.
well, that's the other interesting point. Actually, I think this series starts to shift the needle for league. Because you're getting players starting to go to Sydney rather than Great Britain.
Yes.
And you're starting to get a bevy of union converts, actually, ones that you may have heard of, like Matthew Ridge, and ones that you might not have, like Kurt Sherlock and Johnny Schuster, Darryl Halligan, Paul Simonson, and even a Bay of Plenty fullback called Ian Crossan.
That's right.
They started crossing the ditch, some of them just purely for goal kicking.
Yeah, well, there was Mark Robinson as well, the halfback for North Harbour. He went over and played I think he might have played for the Warriors for a little bit. You're right, Darryl Halligan, he was the Mooloo's finest. Went over there, old Chook on the wing. He scored the odd try, but he absolutely nailed every single goal.
And to this day, the Lispy Halligan is still...
he's still around.
He's still one of the... He coaches a handful of kickers.
Yeah.
And I always think the amazing stat that the Warriors' biggest try scorer in one season was John Kerwin for a long time.
Yeah.
So there was huge names that went to league.
So, I mean, it's a very different game now than it was then, but you can probably credit that magical winter of 1985 to see where that shift started.
Yeah, I think you're right there.
Right, absolutely. Well,
and if you want to have a relive Carlaw Park, you can go and have a sniff around the Auckland University hostels, which are on there now, which may have a similar scent, to be honest.
Imagine if they'd kept that and we'd developed that stadium into a downtown stadium.
Imagine if we'd developed anything.
That's a different podcast. Dai Henwood, Dylan Cleaver, thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Blast from the Past, thanks to Kärcher. That was the Low Blows episode. Next week, in next week's episode, we are going just across town to Mount Smart Stadium, which is, funny enough, is the kind of home of league now, for a very interesting game between the All Whites and Kuwait.
This is the Agenda Podcasts, Blast from the Past. Proudly brought to you by Kärcher Water Blasters. Get ready for summer and clean 50% faster with Kärcher.